Chapter 23. Out of the frying pan, into the fire. Thomas More. I had no choice but to fly to Bangkok and get a hotel for the night. I'd just avoid Khao San Road. Christ, imagine if they got the Guinea gangsters after me also. Raped, murdered, and giblets sold off on the black market. A friend who I gave that story to read and saved myself the bother of relaying it verbally pointed out that they could have been organ harvesters and they were getting my parents' details so they could keep sending them texts long after I'd been chopped up. There was one particularly odd event that happened in Al-Mami's dingy little room. They gave me a curry to eat. It was delicious. I'd had it before. He'd given it to me. And they all cheered me on as I ate it. What if it was human leftover meat after they'd harvested the organs? Knowing my luck, this would be so. I really don't know why I went to Thailand. Maybe the brainwaves had convinced me to go, so they had a heads up in organising the rape event. The only plus side was I knew how to move around without detection. While I waited for Motorcycle Guy, I booked a seat on the Chiang Mai to BKK train. I had no intention of taking it. It was a ruse to put them off. Finally, the Motorcycle Guy arrived. It was the older one. He said, "Check the passport. We haven't copied it or messed with any of the pages." Oh, really? Is that something that you'd been planning on doing? Fuck me, everyone was in on it. I stood across the road from the Loy and caught a Song Tao. They're little utes where you sit in the back. I'd caught them a lot in Pattaya. They wouldn't be redirected for cash like a taxi could. They were like buses. Before that, I'd strode into the Loy, as confident as you like, and handed my room access card over to the ladyboy. She cheerfully accepted it, and I said, "Thanks for a great stay. I'll be sure to leave her a review." She was serving someone else, but she smiled hospitably, and we left on good terms. That's how you should act if you're going to engage in criminal activities. Show class to the face of your enemies, or in her case, your intended victim. She really was the only professional in this whole operation. And much later, I did leave her a review. I heard a woman scream in one of the dormitories above me. I reported it to reception, but no one wanted to do anything about it. I spent the whole night outside on the street under CCTV. Don't stay here if you're a solo female traveller. It's not safe. On the way to the train station, there were so many males and utes following us. I was the only passenger on the Song Tao. The followers were obvious in that they never took their eyes off me. When I got close to the station, I got him to drop me off. I quickly ran and found a motorcycle taxi and asked him to take me to the airport. That's the way to travel. Backpack and bag so you can jump on the back of motorcycles that can leave followers and trucks well behind. And he did. I pulled my hair out of the top knot and let it fly in the wind. Freedom, baby. I was on top of the world. At Chiang Mai Airport, I jumped in front of an airline, any airline would do, I wasn't fussy, and asked about the next flight to BKK. There was one soon and I had the cash to drop on it. Thank fucking Goddess and Buddha. Suddenly there was a woman behind me pushing up against me, so I brought my backpack and bag around to the front. She seemed Jewish princessy and also was very stressed. She could have been trying to plant drugs in my bag. Not today, sweetheart. A whole lot of other people joined her in line behind. From this desk being empty to suddenly having a long queue, I didn't think it at the time, but they were all trying to get on my flight. After changing in the bathroom and freshening up, donning a bandana over my hair and wearing a COVID mask, I pretty much had to. I was hack coughing like a sickie. I went out to wait in the long departure line. I spotted some of the Loy Jewish princesses and IDF-HCs. One woman spied me and her face fell. She had a look that was a mixture between disappointment that I wasn't dead and fear that I'd dob her in. That's what you get, bitch. Suddenly I realised that this whole line was full of Jewish Americans. They were so loud and with freakish features. One woman who was very attractive had that unnatural look. It's really hard to describe. I couldn't help staring at her. She never once made eye contact. There was quite a lot of this. I stepped out of the line for a minute to go buy snacks. The snack shop started to close as soon as I went in there. What the fuck is going on in here? I grabbed some pork crisp things, but they just made me have a coughing fit. I threw them out. There was a Thai woman and her kid in the line behind me this time. Her face reflected how I felt. She was looking around in terror at all the Americans and Israelis. I gave her a comforting smile and she smiled back. I said to her, "Gee, I really hope we get on this flight." She just nodded. It was crazy that all these freakish tourists were traveling to BKK, where I was heading. When I was in the carry-on security check, I spied the most freakish woman I'd ever seen in my life. She really did look part lizard. That's all I can say. I'm not one to believe in lizard people or aliens who walk the earth, but maybe I should start. She had a strange jaw that stuck out, eyes of a murky mustard colour with pupils that weren't round, more oval, and frizzy blonde hair that also looked inhuman. While I was trying to grab all my stuff out at the other end, she kept getting in my road. Thankfully, there were Perspex guards to stop people interfering with my carry-on luggage. I was really worried about someone planting drugs on me. Her husband, who was like a Skeksis, tall with limbering legs that needed to be held up by crutches, also kept getting in my way. Excuse me, I spoke loudly, trying to hop around them in my socks since my steel caps were going through the x-ray. The woman said something in a language I didn't recognize. It was either Hebrew or lizard language. I'll never forget the sight of her. Chilling. The departure lounge downstairs was full of another class of freaks. They all wore beigey brown, the men in t-shirts and fisherman's pants, and the women all with their ankles covered up in long skirts and shawls covering the sinful flesh of their bare shoulders. I knew what this was straight away. Cult. There were so many. I spied one male, white and in his 30s. He was looking at his phone with a smug smile on his face. I knew he was looking at videos of me. Oh, so the cult lets you watch porn. I wouldn't have thought so, but here we are. So this cult was after me too. That's what Robin Hood and his ginger rapist mate were in. This cult. And something else was very revealing. They were calling for people who hadn't checked in to contact desk staff as they were running late. The names all started with Han. Or maybe it was Hon. Either way, it was my black US friend's name. So he was in this fucking cult. What a dropkick. He didn't wear beige though. Maybe he was just working for them and bringing me to be mass raped and just used their name. What in the Jonestown bullshit was this cult's problem with me? Was I considered the whore of Babylon who had to be sacrificed to death so that humanity was to be saved? I didn't know when I started Googling cults who all went by the name Han. Star Wars cult? I couldn't find anything, just references to Han Solo. That'd be just perfect if I was to be sacrificed by a cult that worshipped one of my favourite childhood trilogies. It was uncomfortable, to say the least, to be surrounded by so many of my enemies. Or I was their enemy. They were just players in a weird game I was in, characters in a human social experiment, malleable fools who could be manipulated into thinking that I was enemy number one, like Alex had been. I should have gotten him to elaborate. Poor Alex, he came speeding into the monastery on foot while I'd been sitting at the picnic table. He was calling out to me. Weirdly, the homeless guy who'd been sleeping up against the building was following him and calling out his name. He had no choice but to go with him. He's probably dead by now. If I wasn't so on edge, I'd consider for a moment what a huge shame it is to know someone associated with you is killed because of you. That's some thug life shit. I had to remember that he'd sell me out in a second to save his own skin. I'd let him down, but like him, I had to look out for myself. On the bus ride out to our plane, there appeared to be another cult on my flight. The women still wore long skirts over their long pants and jeans, but they were colourful. There were a couple who were normally dressed. No long skirt for her, she must have been a leader, and were talking in what I thought was Spanish to three young women in flesh-hiding garb. I was staring intently at this woman and she never once met my eyes. This whole thing of not looking at me was dehumanizing and was designed to be so. While we waited in line, I stood at the back of the queue. The three cult girls were in front of me. One of them, a very attractive, vain and bitchy one, held her phone up to pretend to film herself, and the other two. I was in the background of the shot and I instinctively ducked down. She wasn't to be stopped and eventually she got me in shot. Her hands moved so quickly like a typical social media addict as she zoomed in on me, then quickly opened her Fastbook and posted the video. Fastbook? I couldn't believe they were openly using such a generic app. They were openly able to betray someone's privacy on such a common public app. How unethical. Another reason to hate Meta and Zuck. They don't give a shit. I decided to stir one of these high school mean girls when we got on the plane. They were older than high school, but being in a cult stunts maturity. She was trying to push her backpack into the overhead. I helped her push it in further and I said, "You need a man, don't you? You're usually traveling with a man who's meant to help you." They obviously hadn't been married off yet in the cult. That would have been a sore point, for sure. There was a generic-looking white male in his 30s sitting in front of me. He looked familiar and I decided that he must have been at the Loy. I can't tell the difference between white males like that. They all look the same. Same haircut, same style of dressing. It's not my fault they are characterless. He took out his phone to film himself and probably hold it up to catch me in shot behind. The gorgeous Thai male air attendant who was doing the safety demo scolded him and told him to stop filming. Yes, everyone who wasn't these people were bothered by these people. Their vibe, their aura was evil. I was now sitting on the plane surrounded by elephant-sized white Americans. Why the fuck were they here? They were talking Trump and I could have pegged them for Trump supporters without them even opening their mouths. One of them, spying me in a COVID mask, said loudly, "There seems to be a woman who's not a real woman on the flight." This was a pretty outrageous thing to say. Or maybe he thought I was trans. Their absolute worst enemy. He should have met the ladyboy at the Loy, who was apparently on their side. And these types of jackasses used to be believers in Jewish conspiracy shit, pre-October 7. I'd heard that these Christian nationalists, I wasn't sure if they were, but they would have held similar views on harmless minorities, were pro-Israel because they believed that the second coming of Jesus would happen in Jerusalem when all the Jews returned to that place. They'd all be sent down to hell and the nutty Christian weirdos would all transcend to heaven. So they were all anti-Semites, but Israel was ignorantly enjoying their support. And I guess anything's better than Islam to these basic morons. They'd chosen a side. And they were all meeting together in every place I decided to go in Southeast Asia. I don't understand how I managed to get flights and a room at the Loy. I was surrounded. I guess I know now. The couple next to me were giants also, but they were Euros. As we landed, the plane skidded. I turned to them and said, "Too much weight." I thought it was funny, but they didn't. They must have been with the elephant trumpets. I jumped up very quickly when I could because I would have gotten a panic attack at being surrounded by them all standing. I opened the overhead and said to the bald trumpet below it, "Look out, your head looks like it'd bleed." I heard a gasp from those who'd overheard it. I was furious. I pushed in front of the dickhead in front of me and stood in his aisle because it had more room for the emergency exit. He actually apologized when I did this. Embarrassed about the Loy, maybe. Something else incredibly funny happened when we got into the BKK airport. I went to the nearest toilet and my little high school bitch friends were in there. Not the filming one, the other two. When I came out to wash my hands in the basin, they'd stripped off their shirts and were posing in front of the mirror just in their sports bras. One looked a bit guilty about being so revealing, but the other one was getting right into it. She was really digging her half-naked torso. I couldn't help but snigger out loud. They both looked at me with surprise. What reaction had they expected? Admiration that these silly girls were carrying on like me, the whore of Babylon? It really went to show that these girls were very fucked up in the head by the sect. I should have gone and dobbed them into their leader. A part of me was glad that they were sex-positive, curious in their own little way. Women should be proud of their bodies. I wouldn't have laughed if they weren't tracking me and mocking me. I had to jump right into action when I got to BKK. I found a hotel, a good one, not a cheapo like the Loy, on just glancing at the map. I took my phone to the taxi organizer and she quickly shot a piece of paper with the hotel name in Thai to an old driver. I followed him to the car. He got so lost and it was nerve-wracking. At one point there I was freaking out because we were in an industrial part of BKK that looked dodgy as hell. Surely the hotel wasn't here. He handed me his phone to show me where the hotel was. The woman had written down something else, not the hotel. Fuck. Was absolutely everyone involved in this. I didn't bother finding the original hotel. Instead, I insisted he take me to the bus terminal. There was some kind of peak hour traffic happening and I started to hyperventilate. I recognized the major roadway. I can probably walk from here. He convinced me otherwise, saying it was too far. He actually calmed me down and I appreciated it. This was heavy. When we finally got to the terminal, the fare was crazy high. Mate, I'm sorry, but I can't pay that. The taxi company got it wrong. I gave myself a 200 baht discount, which was mean, but I was operating on panic and fear, and I gave no fucks about forgiving the dispatcher's mistake. I hated the look on the poor guy's face, but this was my safety at stake. I had to conduct an experiment. If I put my phone and tablet in a bus terminal storage locker for the night, would that be enough? Or is the possibility of bio-tracking my very body in use here? I wasn't a conspiracy theorist. I hated the whole COVID vaccine contains nanotechnology that allows us to be tracked theory that those who were mentally affected by the pandemic subscribed to. I had friends that I spoke to no longer because of their brainwashing. All conspiracy theories contain an element of truth. I doubted it was the COVID vaccine. I think they developed the technology to track our bodies in general. After all, we have iron in us. After putting my devices to bed for the night in a tiny locker, I set off on foot to find a hotel. I had planned to take a subway into busier parts of BKK and stay in an expensive hotel, but I decided to find one in the leafy neighbourhood across from the 6-lane roadway that ran in front of the bus terminal. I knew this neighbourhood already, having come here to meet with a rag trade male to have some dresses sewn. He was an old German sex tourist, sex resident now, who claimed he had to live in the tropics because of his arthritis. Lies from the get-go. He also ripped me off on a deal, sending me out the garments with a whole piece missing on each dress. Fucking Thailand. It wasn't the Thais who ripped you off or tried to kidnap you. It was all the foreigners. Expats is the wrong word. They're opportunistic grifters. The coast seemed to be clear as I walked down the wide, clean footpath after traversing the walkway over the heavy traffic that held the Ekamai subway station. I saw a white, older male walking towards me. Typical sex tourist or resident. I decided to ask him anyway if he knew of a hotel. Sometimes they are okay. I'd met semi-normal ones. He pointed to a restaurant bar place across the street on a corner that I'd just passed. That place rents out rooms. They're long-term, but I think they do short-term too. What a massive help. I never would have expected this 2-story concrete building to be anything but what was advertised on the outside. It seemed to have a US theme, which I was a bit hesitant about. The Thai woman who greeted me allayed all my fears. She was so friendly and helpful. They were full up, but she knew of one down the little soy that this place cornered. She even went with me to do the talking. I must have looked a state and like I needed a place to put my head. I sure did. That little hotel was like so many little Thai hotels, coffee and tea facilities in the humble functional lobby. My saviour had said before we got to it on our short walk, "It's old and not very fancy." I really didn't care. This was marvellous. And the receptionist was lovely, a young woman who presented quite masculinely. A gay woman on reception to protect me from outsiders. Joy. I still had an optimistic view on hotel receptionists. Surely they're not all able to be bought. I'd just run into some very bad luck. Managed bad luck that was pre-planned. She showed me to an upstairs room up a staircase that had no railing and that you had to be careful to stick near the wall. The room was as comfortable as you liked. I hated how other foreign tourists demanded a high standard of their accom in Thailand. They couldn't afford 5 stars back in their countries, so they should all pull their heads in. The bathroom was huge and open plan with a manually operated gas hot water system. When I was doing the rag trade thing for my business, I'd lived in a long-term apartment that had this very thing, so I knew how to operate it to get lovely hot water. I sat on the floor and let the water wash over me, cleansing and massaging away all my stress. I then dressed and went down for an early dinner at the restaurant. I love that you can eat at any time in this country, and better to avoid the rush. My restaurant woman had asked on the way to this hotel if I was here for the US elections. Oh, so that was what that was all about. US citizens flooding here to celebrate what they hoped would be a Trump win. Why celebrate in Thailand? Surely the biggest celebrations would be in the US. I didn't see the woman, possibly the owner, again. The male waiters really made me feel welcome, and the veal masala was spot on. My body had a hard time processing food, but I did my best to finish it. Luckily, I had an appetite at all. I really needed this sustenance. The only downside was the huge television that was broadcasting the ongoing election results. Nothing had been declared yet, but Trump was in the lead. I had a red bandana and I immediately shed it in case anyone mistook me for a Trump supporter. If necessary, this would have kept me safe, but anyway. A young couple had been sitting outside when I'd walked in. I'd not even looked at them. They walked through the restaurant and the young woman looked my way and smiled. I smiled back. I shouldn't have. The young male looked Israeli. She didn't, but who knew with Israelis? I'd met a Georgian one after all. She could be Blondie, Russian heritage or something. The way she knew to look to my direction as soon as she entered the restaurant may have meant that she knew who I was. I briefly gave myself permission to feel worried about it, and then I put it out of my mind. I was going to get some good sleep. It was still daylight. Back in my room, I opened the window. Thank God I stay open, and looked out to see what was out there. A good ledge that could be walked along led to the end of the building about 8 metres away. There was a huge wire fence that backed onto the property and it divided it from a very flash, huge high-rise, which I figured was luxury apartments. It was something, I decided. I also put one of the heavy block cushioned stools up against the door, which would hopefully make a scraping sound across the floor if the door was opened. I was a bit worried that I wouldn't wake up from this noise, such was my exhaustion. I needn't have worried because I woke up every few hours. Although I was still in hyper-alertness, I managed to get back to sleep each time. This was only natural. This whole thing was fucking huge, well-funded, and I'd be crazy to think it was going to be over just like that.